Hello, and welcome back to Unsavory History. My name is Valerie, and today we're talking about Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land, and why it's not as patriotic as many people believe. When most people hear This Land Is Your Land, they think of a simple patriotic song. It's played at school assemblies, political events, national celebrations, and especially around the 4th of July. For many Americans, it's a song about unity, freedom, and pride in the country. But the story behind both the song and the man who wrote it is far more complicated. To understand This Land Is Your Land, you first have to understand the world that shaped Woody Guthrie, a world defined by poverty, environmental disaster, economic collapse, and the struggle of ordinary Americans trying to survive. That story begins with the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl was one of the worst environmental disasters in American history. During the 1930s, large portion of the southern plains, including Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico, were devastated by a combination of severe drought and poor land management practices. For decades, farmers had plowed up millions of acres of native prairie grasses to plant crops. Those grasses had evolved over thousands of years to hold the soil in place. When the drought arrived, there was nothing left to protect the land. The topsoil dried out and turned to dust, and then the winds came. Massive dust storms swept across the plains, carrying millions of tons of soil into the air. Some storms were so large they darkened the sky in the middle of the day. People described them as black blizzards. Dust crept into homes through cracks in the walls, around doors and windows. It coated furniture, food, water, and clothing. Families often woke up covered in dirt after sleeping through the night. The dust was not just an inconvenience, it was dangerous. Many people developed respiratory illnesses from breathing in the fine particles. Children and the elderly were especially vulnerable. Farmers watched as years of work literally blew away in the wind. The economic consequences were equally devastating. Crop failures became common. Fields that had once produced food and income became barren wastelands. Livestock suffered from starvation and dehydration as grazing land disappeared and feed became scarce. In many cases, ranchers and farmers were forced to sell off animals at a loss or destroy them because they could no longer afford to keep them alive. As the Great Depression continued, thousands of families found themselves trapped between environmental disaster and economic ruin. Banks foreclosed on farms. Families lost land that had been in their possession for generations. Entire communities began to disappear. Faced with little hope of recovery, hundreds of thousands of Americans packed whatever possessions they could carry and headed west. Many traveled to California. They believed California represented opportunity. Newspaper advertisements and stories from migrants painted a picture of plentiful jobs and fertile farmland. For desperate families, California seemed like a chance to start over. The reality was so much different. Jobs were scarce and competition was fierce. Migrant workers often found themselves living in makeshift camps, tents, or crude shanties built from scrap materials. Entire families sometimes shared single-room shelters without running water, electricity, or proper sanitation. The migrants quickly earned a reputation among some Californians as unwanted outsiders. People from Oklahoma and neighboring states were frequently called Okies, a term that soon became a slur. They were blamed for taking jobs, lowering wages, and straining local resources. Many employers took advantage of the migrants' desperation by paying extremely low wages. Families worked long hours in agricultural fields simply to survive. Some communities openly discriminated against migrants, and tensions occasionally erupted into violence. Woody Guthrie lived through much of this. Born in Oklahoma in 1912, Guthrie witnessed firsthand the hardships brought on by economic collapse and environmental catastrophe. Like many migrants, he traveled west in search of opportunity and found a reality far harsher than the promises people had been sold. These experiences profoundly shaped his worldview. Guthrie became fascinated by the stories of working people, the farmers who lost everything, the migrant laborers who struggled to feed their families, and the ordinary Americans who felt forgotten by those in power. Rather than writing songs about politicians or military victories, Guthrie wrote about people. His songs focused on workers, poverty, inequality, labor struggles, and the gap between America's ideals and its realities. By the late 1930s and the early 1940s, Guthrie had become associated with labor activism and left-wing political movements. While historians continue to debate the exact nature of some of his political affiliations, there is little doubt that he was highly critical of the economic inequality and sympathetic to the working class causes. That perspective would eventually find its way into his most famous song. In 1940, Guthrie wrote This Land Is Your Land as a response to Irving Berlin's enormously popular song, God Bless America. According to Guthrie, he grew frustrated with what he viewed as an overly idealized portrayal of the United States. While millions of Americans were struggling through the Great Depression and recovering from the Dust Bowl, songs celebrating the nation's greatness felt disconnected from the reality he saw around him. Using a traditional folk melody, Guthrie wrote what was originally titled God Bless America for Me. The song described beautiful landscapes, open highways, valleys, forests, and fields. On the surface, it sounded patriotic, but beneath that patriotic imagery was something deeper. Guthrie was asking a question. Who exactly was this land for? Was it truly for everyone, or only for those fortunate enough to own property, find work, and prosper? The answer becomes clearer when you read the verses that are often omitted from modern performances. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on the sign it said no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. In the squares of the city, in the shadows of the steeple, by the relief office I seen my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can ever make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. Those verses reveal a side of the song that many Americans never hear. They question economic inequality, challenge barriers that prevent people from accessing opportunity, and draw attention to those left behind during times of hardship. When the song entered schools and mainstream culture, many of these verses were omitted. The version most Americans learned emphasized national unity and the beauty of the American landscape, while leaving out much of Guthrie's social criticism. As a result, generations of Americans grew up hearing This Land Is Your Land as a straightforward patriotic anthem. But Guthrie's original version was much more complicated. He loved the beauty of America. He celebrated its landscapes and its people. Yet he also believed patriotism required honesty. It required acknowledging inequality, poverty, and injustice when they existed. This is what makes this song so enduring. On one level, it's a celebration of America. On the other level, it is a protest song. It reminds listeners that the nation's ideals are meaningful only if they are available to everyone. When This Land Is Your Land is played at national celebrations today, both meanings still exist. It can be heard as a celebration of the country, but it can also be heard as a challenge, a reminder that America has often struggled to live up to its promises. And perhaps that tension is exactly why this song continues to resonate more than 80 years after it was written. It isn't simply about what America is. It's about what America aspires to be. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share. In our next episode, we'll be discussing the often overlooked contributions of Black soldiers and immigrant troops during the Civil War, and how their service helped shape the outcome of the conflict. Until next time, this has been Unsavory History. Thank you, and bye-bye.